Good evening and welcome to tonight's DEI meeting. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Wiles for a second.
All right, well, welcome everyone. As you have seen from the agenda, later on in our learning component, we're going to be starting a three-part conversation around working with students with disabilities and the topic of neurodiversity. So we have three guests with us tonight who are going to lend their perspectives and voices to our conversation. We have the director of our Pupil Personnel Services, Lisa Knowles.
Good evening, everyone.
We have our instructional administrator for elementary special education. This is Kelly Dioldi. And Megan, I think I saw you jump in here. And yes, and our secondary instructional administrator for special education, Megan Rivers, is joining us as well. So thank you, ladies, for being with us. We're really excited to expand our discussion on the big topic of DEI to include our students with disabilities and the whole idea of neurodiversity. So more on that later. Varshini, I'm going to turn it back to you for the regular agenda.
Okay, so next on the agenda is approving the minutes. The minutes were sent out, so please take a minute to look them over if you haven't done so. Okay, can I have a movement to approve? Okay, Ms. Gonzalez, and then a second. Ms. Kaplan? Okay. So next on the list is the reports from the subcommittees. Did community engagement meet?
Yes, we did meet.
Okay.
All right, yeah, so I'll start there. With the community engagement, we met January 4th, and we talked about the fireside chats. We were able to, we have dates for all of our future fireside chats, knowing that we'll just have to book the library so many days in advance. So we can't do it too far in advance. So we'll just make sure that we have space and we have a great team to be able to do that. And so we kind of looked at the PTA calendar and made sure that none of those dates would be the same. However, now that we've looked at it, and last night we were supposed to have our fireside chat, but with the weather conditions, we were unable to have it, but realized it was actually the same day as a Board of Ed meeting. And I feel like all of our future dates might actually be Board of Ed meeting dates. So during our next conversation with the subcommittee, we'll have to maybe relook at that, if those dates will keep moving forward, or if we need to change some dates.
Yeah, let me jump in. Last night was a rescheduled meeting.
Oh, okay.
It had been postponed from the week before, so you might be okay.
I think we're not, though.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, so I looked at the future ones. I think we might have some overlap, but we'll see. So that's going to be part of our agenda for our next meeting. We did get to host the noon one yesterday. So Gwen, myself, and Mike, we were there, but we didn't get any community members. I think the weather was probably one of the issues too. So it was snowing at that time. We'll see. Next month is going to be, we're going to try a virtual option, and we'll see if that might generate some more community members. And so we'll see about that.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Werther. Next is the research committee.
That is me. The research committee has not met yet. We will be meeting soon. There were some hiccups in trying to get some of the data that I had promised to give the committee. So we're trying to get that together and work around some of the scheduling snafus that we had. So I hope to meet with the research committee next week.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Westbrook. And then student voice.
Student voice has not met either. We did focus groups with students, and we've had several programs with students in the school, but we have not been able to circle back around and pull the Student Voice Committee back together again to talk about what the next steps are for the rest of the year. So hopefully that committee will be meeting next week as well.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Osbrook. And then the communications subcommittee.
Hi, yes, we were able to meet on January 11th, and part of the conversation was on the fireside chats. And so we talked about that in advertising. Patrice was with us from the communications team and talked about using some of the artwork from not just the one piece that we've seen so far on social media, but maybe using some other artwork. And Mike was talking about reaching out to Michelle from the art department, and maybe this could be, on an annual basis, students can create new images for this, which would be really wonderful to see some new pieces to advertise these fireside chats or any other things that we might want to do as a committee or community. We also talked about that there will be this full team equity team meeting that's happening later this month on January 31st. So that was part of the conversation. And we also talked about an update to the video footage. There was a lot of things that the communication team has already have footage of. And I think today they added some more because there was a really wonderful event at Farnsworth Middle School with Tower Kitchen coming in, and Chef Anissa Wahid brought in some samples, a really delicious chicken dish with apricot and prune, a rice and green beans. And students today, when I heard them talking, some students were saying, hey, if we had this, for lunch options, the school would make so much money because I would just buy lunch all the time. And other kids were saying, I never try new foods at all, strictly, eat the same things. Like, I tried this today and I loved it. So those were just really wonderful. So thank you, Mike, for making that happen. It was really great.
Yeah, I didn't do anything other than say yes, I would love to host this experience for our students. This was entirely a partnership between Renee Heller, our food service director, and Chef Wahid. And I would echo Leah's sentiments. Today was an awesome 2.5 hours in our cafeteria for our kids. They had some excellent food. And I was astonished and impressed by we had hundreds of kids go up to that table in every lunch period and try some Moroccan food for potentially the first time, which was really cool, really cool. So Tara's Kitchen on Western Avenue might be really busy really soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are some of those things that, will probably be added to that video footage from communication. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swerler and Mr. Laster. Next on our agenda is DEI in action.
That is me. This has been a busy month, even though we did not have school. We had our break. There was a DEI statewide leaders network meeting that occurred right before the break, and that was very helpful for a number of reasons. But it was good to connect with people from across the state who are working on these issues and compare notes. We also had a visit from an EOP ambassador who was a former Guilderland graduate who came back to the high school to speak to students in the Focus program. We worked with Brian Mazza to bring that young man back and to have him talk to the students. It was a very successful program. The students were very interested. We wanted to get students interested in what their options were for college and what supports are out there financially for them that they might not be aware of, so that they start thinking about that earlier and seeing it as a possibility. So it was a really good meeting. We had our equity officers regional meeting as well. And that was insightful, and it was good to connect with people from across our region because we are looking to compare notes in terms of our district policies and things that we're trying to develop. And we wanted to make sure we're in alignment with what has been going on across our region. It was interesting to note that 1/3 of the high schools in our region, there's 24 school districts in our region, do not have a diversity statement in their Board of Ed, the policy. So that was a very interesting way. And we were talking about what are the barriers to developing that and how people were struggling. So people are at different points in dealing with DEI in their districts. And I think we should be very proud of the work that we are doing. And although it does seem in isolation sometimes, our problems are very distinct, and people would love to have our problems in our district. So that it was good and encouraging to hear some of that. Leah and I did attend AES. We went to Altamont Elementary School and attended the staff meeting, introduced ourselves to the staff. That was my first time at the building. Leah had been there a couple of times, I believe, prior to that. But I finished my rounds in terms of meeting the staff at all of the 7 schools. So I feel happy about having done that. And we also attended a STOP conference sponsored by the Anti-Defamation League in the Capital District at Siena College. We brought students to that event. It was a very positive event for all of us. And it was good to hear a lot more from student voices, and gave us a lot more to consider. We have like the Elevating Student Voices program at the BOCES. We have our Student Voice Committee, and we're now, seeing the voices of our students who came out for this conference, and they all are asking the same questions and having the same needs. So there's a lot of work to be done in organizing the students from here to the end of the year. And there's a lot to report back out to the Student Voice Committee when we do have that opportunity to talk. We are also preparing for Superintendent's Day, which will be coming up. And we're looking at what type of training that we'll be doing. We're doing a presentation to both the elementary and the upper division faculty and staff, and we are also looking to do possibly workshops with both of those groups as well. And lastly, I guess we're still talking about upcoming things that are happening. I think it was already mentioned by Leah that on the 30th, we're going to have a district-wide equity committee meeting, which we're preparing for, and anxiously waiting to really start to begin the process of bringing some coherence and cohesion to our district-wide view of ourselves, our DEI work. And also, as I said, the students are very interested in doing something around the anti-hate rally or something connected to that, or the cultural fair. So we want to make sure that the students get that end of the year programming done, and that especially our seniors, walk out of this space knowing that they've left a legacy for the students who are coming behind them. So that's pretty much the DEI in action in this past month since our last program. Leah, would you want to add anything? I know you've been in the schools.
Sure, I can add a couple of things too. And yesterday, actually, Derek and we also joined the Social Studies Cabinet meeting that they had yesterday. And we also joined the Linwood faculty as the equity team rolled out this introduction to Blind Spot as this optional school-wide book study. So we were there for that, and the equity team at Linwood did an amazing job trying to, get some people excited about this book, which I think there's a lot of excitement around that. Let's see. And I was able to join a couple of classes within this past month, a 4th grade class in Guilderland Elementary School, and got to see some math and reading and writing for two days in a row. I also joined the civil conversations class again in the high school, which is always so wonderful to be able to hear those conversations, those discussions between these students. And I think I mentioned it last time, but 2 kids always kind of like on the opposite spectrum of things. And the teacher said, no, really, they eat lunch together. They actually continue the conversations afterwards. It's pretty amazing that what these students are talking about and bringing outside of the classroom as well. I actually did this math project with Jody Cahill from Farnsworth Middle School, introduced it, and we actually planned this. So this is kind of this full unit that we planned, me introducing food insecurity for this math project. And I reached out to Capital Roots and the Regional Food Bank to get some information about food insecurity in our local areas. And the project was that students had to then have that in mind as they thought about ways in which to combat food insecurity. And one of those things is thinking about urban gardens and, well, how do you create gardens? And so they had to do this work with Perimeter. And I was kind of, Jody's a great teacher, because I was like, okay, that's how you distribute properties, and that's how you do like terms. And so they were doing all this math, but for, seeing it like why is applicable in the real world setting, so that was really wonderful. So those are just some of the things. And tomorrow, Derek and I will be joining the high school student forum as well. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Westbrook and Ms. Werther. Dr. Wiles.
Just one kind of a tangential update I want to give everybody. We are in the process of putting together something called a Future Ready Task Force. As a matter of fact, the Board of Ed appointed, I think we're up to 46 members of the task force, students, parents, teachers, administrators, community members. And their job over the next several months will really be to help us envision what our school buildings and our classrooms should look like into the future. And so this will inform not only our next capital project, which we're hoping to bring to voters in May of 2025, but also ones beyond that as well. And what's important about the work, I think, is that in the charge to this committee, who's going to be thinking about instructional programs and instructional spaces and innovative pedagogy, part of it will also be to filter everything that we want to wish for and hope for in our facilities to be filtered through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So while it's not exactly DEI, everything we do is informed by DEI. So I thought this group would be interested in knowing about that. I think there's people on this call who will be on that committee too. So thank you for that interjection.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Wiles. If no one has anything else to add, then we'll move on to the next agenda, which is the learning component. So I'll give it back to Mr. Westbrook.
Good evening, everyone. Today, I definitely wanted to introduce the topic of neurodiversity and disabilities. And so we brought in the A-team from our district, Lisa Knowles, Megan Rivers, and Kelly Diol, to sort of help us out with the discussion and really ground us in what's happening here in our district. With no further ado, I do want to share one of the videos on neurodiversity and one on disabilities, and be able to talk about those concepts, make sure we're comfortable with them, ask any questions, and we have a wealth of knowledge here in our meeting today to sort of help facilitate that discussion. So I will share my screen as soon as I find the right video. Here we are.
Neurodiversity. With this term, we mean that not all our brains work alike. The term originates from the autism rights movement in the 1990s and includes everyone, both neurodivergent and neurotypical people. The concept focuses on the fact that there are many ways of thinking and learning. It helps reduce stigma about those differences, while highlighting the strengths of the neurodiverse individuals instead of their challenges, something our societies and education systems often fail to do.
Neurodiversity means that there are variations in the ways how our brains function. All of our brains fulfill the same duties, so to speak. They process information, they integrate information, they perceive sensory input from the world, they try to make sense of it, they try to give us orientation in the world, and if necessary, they lead us to actions to ensure our survival in the world.
The way this system works varies from brain to brain, and sometimes also from day to day. For example, a night with no sleep can temporarily alter our information integration system and make us more sensitive to light and sound, and maybe even more anxious than usual. Another reason for variations may be genetic. In fact, many well-known conditions can be conceptualized as information integration disorders. They vary in severity. Whereas some of these conditions come with medical disabilities, others only become a disability because of societal barriers. It is, however, important to understand that these neurological differences do not need to be cured. They need accommodation instead.
The concept of neurodiversity now focuses on the idea that in many of the milder forms of these conditions, the potentially disabling effect depends mainly on the demands of specific social contexts, and that societal barriers hinder optimal development of specific strengths that are part of these alternative ways of perceiving and interacting with the world.
Even though research shows that, for example, autism and dyslexia can bestow special skills in pattern recognition, memory, or mathematics, those affected struggle to get through university and have a higher dropout rate.
If we provide some help to increase orientation of these individuals in their surrounding world and their specific demands, we can increase their academic survival rates and unleash their potential of unconventional insights of these special and precious minds, and that may lead to creative scientific ideas.
Look at the world and see, in the middle of it all, the range of different brains that make humanity's progress in science and the creative arts possible. People who perceive things differently are crucial for progress. When 99 neurologically similar people cannot solve a problem, it often is the one who's slightly different who holds the answer.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to stop sharing and let people react and be able to react to what they've seen. Is there anything that stuck out to you in the video about neurodiversity, things that you may not have heard or known before, or distinctions that you think are important that we pay attention to? Yes, Chris.
I mean, I think there's so much new research pointing to like the abilities of people with neurodivergent brains, that the pattern recognition is one that always pops out to me. Like, here's something that they're actually going to be better at because of their neurotypicality, and being able to harness that and utilize that. You know, for me, I follow a bunch of on Instagram folks who blog about their own personal experiences with both autism and ADHD, and as adults they're able to express like, here's how this is actually working for me, and here's how I've had to struggle for 20 years through systems that are created for typical brains before I could actually meet efficiency and find my way of being productive and find my way of feeling confident. So if we could reverse engineer so that 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds and younger could find that sooner, I mean, that would just be fantastic, because then those folks could contribute and feel like contributing members of our community.
Thank you. Nina?
Yeah, I agree completely. Just to add to that, it's been referenced to me as people who have differences in that way as having superpowers, that they tend to excel in one area that makes them unique. And I think harnessing that phrase is something that maybe as teachers we can try to focus on, since there is unfortunately, this different stigma or things like that kids tend to get categorized by their own peers. Even it seems like it's becoming more of a thing, unfortunately, which is what some of us in the committee thought was something that we should discuss, that how to help to make it a benefit rather than a detriment.
Definitely. Neurodiversity has now come into the fold of the DEI work, and it's part of what we do. I ran into it in my academic support center work in higher ed and also at RPI, because we had many students who are on the spectrum. So the fact that this information came out of the autism movement and knowing that students are on the spectrum and that they could, with accommodation, do everything that everybody else was doing. We just had to be more considerate of the barriers that may be in place that were impacting their ability to show what they know and contribute. And when that happened, people were able to deal with the situation different. So framing this discourse and understanding that some people are neurotypical and some people are neurodivergent, and what can we do to make sure that we all can benefit from the best that everyone has to offer? Tamika, you have your hand.
Yeah, I had the privilege of watching the video prior to this meeting a few days ago, and it brought to mind that I've had the privilege working with the New York State Department of Health of affirming new relationships with organizations that do host neurodiverse individuals, such as Bring on the Spectrum and a few other organizations. And so I'm responsible for funding and making sure that these places can operate. One of the things to be mindful of, and I've had to do this along the way in my career, is that just to remind people that we do all learn differently. Whether you fall in the category of, on the spectrum or whatever other category you fall under, depending on, your learned environment, our brains operate very differently. I know sometimes I have to reread things 13 times before I get it, but eventually I get it, depending on what the information that's in front of me, because it's not one size fits all. And so being mindful and reminding others that, we're not here to, criticize if someone's not operating uniform, in the uniform way, but find tools and resources and support for individuals that learn very differently, because that's what we've had the privilege of having, right? An environment that supported our growth and our knowledge. And so supporting that further is extremely important. So I love the work that I do, and I, appreciate you bringing the videos to us and bringing this topic to the forefront.
Definitely. Anyone else? It is important to look at the whole student and make sure that, I think the pandemic brought to the fore a lot of the cracks and some of the fissures, and the fact that our students socio-emotionally experienced some challenges coming back into the school environment after being out, and that we do have to pay attention to not just the academic growth of our students, but their social emotional growth and their behavioral management that they have. So we have these things, and I think now more and more people are looking at the whole student, and there's an opportunity in DEI work to make sure that we're branching out and helping people to understand that their equity work requires that we look at all of the different ways that people process information and find ways to support and bring resources of it, make resources available. I'm glad we have people in our district that are spearheading that work in particular. If there are no other comments, I will move on to the disabilities video, and then we'll do sort of a mashup between the two to see how these things are, where the distinctions come up, where the cases come up, where there may be challenges to how we approach this work. Let me see if I can find it.
At Rooted in Rights, our videos are about people with disabilities. But that phrase means different things to different people, because everyone defines disabilities differently. Sometimes people are put into categories. People can have physical, intellectual, and developmental disabilities, deafness and hearing impairments, blindness and vision impairments, symptoms or effects from a chronic condition, mental illness and traumatic brain injury, and that just scratches the surface. And some people don't identify as having disabilities at all. And sometimes having a disability is less about how different you are and more about how differently other people treat you.
Although disabilities can set certain limitations, the biggest limitation is attitudes and prejudice.
People who have mental illness or have been diagnosed, we've been portrayed very negatively and very poorly in the media.
We're just like anyone else, human beings. I don't want to be perfect, but I want to be a person where I have a voice.
Too often, people only focus on the disability. Maybe that's the problem with this whole video. We've been defining disabilities the whole time, when all we needed to do is define people. People come in all shapes and sizes and abilities. No categories necessary. Find more videos at Rooted in Rights.
Okay. Coming back, initial impressions about the point, the message in the video and how we think about the disabilities. I know there's a lot of information thrown in there. I think one of the most difficult things to work with is that the spectrum of disabilities is very broad, and so it's difficult to make a statement about disabilities in general, because there's so much diversity even within that category, and so it prompts us to say we need to be more thoughtful and more point about how we approach students with disabilities, because we have to take case-by-case scenarios and look at how those students are functioning and what type of accommodations they need, and be more individual than categorical sometimes in our approach. Diane, please.
I think that's what makes it so difficult being, having a disability, because there are so many, like trying to find the correct accommodations for students that'll help them. That's what makes it really tough, and just getting students classified and able to receive these accommodations. It's a whole other level.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Shaka.
Hi, everyone. I will say, as a parent of two children that are considered technically neurodiverse, one's an adult and I have an 8-year-old now. I just want to say I agree with everything that you guys have been saying, previous video and current video. And it is very difficult trying to find that balance. And as a parent, with my 25-year-old, really trying to figure out what was going to work for him, and seeing the investment of everyone really just wanting what was best for him. And really it is kind of like a trial and error type thing. But I will say, there were times when, this is a structural, this is a system, right? Where there are those barriers in place where, if I might know what my child needs, but state ed can't per se give me what my child needs because they don't meet a certain requirement or, the likes. So, I I like what you said, Derek, about really looking at things trying to look at things on an individual level compared to, you know, that box that we normally live in because of our children are so diverse. And as we know, everybody has different needs and, you know, just really trying to think about it on that level. And that's really the level of equity, right? Making sure our kids get what they need individually. So, thank you.
No problem. Julianne.
Hi. I think too, I certainly absolutely honor those struggles of like trying to um, travel that circuitous route of finding like which supports support which learners, and every learner is so different and what they bring to the table. And so even you can have kids who have, you know, on paper have the same diagnosis, but they can have 2 or 3 very different strategies that work with them. And that's just sort of everybody's individual makeup of what supports succeed and thrive and help a child thrive, and adults, and which ones don't really work for them. But I think sometimes when I'm working in schools and I'm working with kids, like sometimes I feel like what's missing the most, because I do feel like lots of times there's a lot of people working hard on that academic side of being like, how do we help this child learn to read? How do we help this child learn math? But sometimes I feel like there's like a patience gap and a kindness gap. There's still this like persistent, oh, they look funny, they talk funny, they don't look like me, they don't talk like me, they don't walk like me. There's still this feeling of like somehow less than because they're different, or they look different, or just because it, or you know, or like almost an impatience, like you're not willing to take the extra time if it takes them longer to get words out, or willing to take the extra time to use an interpreter, if they're deaf or hard of hearing, or to take the extra time to use the iPad for like, you know, choosing wants and choices. Sometimes we're working really hard to put all those academic pieces, but sometimes we're falling short when it comes to the like social piece and the patience piece and helping these kids feel like they're genuinely a part of the community, because there's just isn't that next step of outreach. It can kind of be faltering.
I agree. Thank you. My background is in higher education. So the one thing that we noticed in education in general was that 30 to 60% of the students coming into higher education need some form of remediation. So that's the neurotypical and the neurodivergent. That's everybody, you know, and that doesn't even count the developmental skills that the students need to be able to survive in college. The one thing that happens in college, though, is that we don't have to retain everybody, right? If our retention can be 60% or less per year, and no one's really challenging higher education in that realm. But public schools are required to retain the students, and it's a different ball game at this stage of the game. And being able to recognize all students have a personal learning style that they bring to the table, and it's important to not attach. It's very difficult, but very important not to attach stigma to that, and be able to serve all students, you know, as many students as we can. And sometimes if accommodations are put in place, we can serve more students than what we think. And some of the things that we're looking for in terms of how we teach, in terms of just their knowledge, we haven't given them other ways of making things or playing with things in order to generate ways of showing what they know and being able to demonstrate that in the classroom environment. So we're not necessarily keeping up with where education is going. So I'm very happy that we have folks in our district who are thinking along those lines and already planning with our students who are neurodivergent and neurotypical, to push that conversation as to how we can reach as many students as possible and become a more inclusive learning community. I mean, that's the DEI lens, literally, in a nutshell. So that's a question that remains before us, and these are some of the challenges that lie in our before us as we do this work, and we don't want to lose important aspects or facets of this discussion because we overlook them. So this is why we're spending some time on neurodiversity, looking at how our students are impacted. Hopefully next month we'll be talking to some specific students, alumni and current students, to see what their experience has been. And then also being able to come back to the staff in our district who are working very much on these issues. Julianne, is your hand up a second time or did it not go away? I see a raised hand.
Sorry, that was an accident.
Oh, okay. Chris. And I think there's
Megan Rivers posted a nice comment in the, do you want me to read it? Because I was going
yes.
I was going to reference back to it. So she said, our mic's not working. The clip reminded me of the importance of person first language. We don't say an autistic person or a learning disabled person. Instead, we say a person with autism, someone with a math disability. Language matters. Person first language recognizes someone is far more than their disability. When I think about this in the context of the work of DEI, this relates to all other categories too. And I think sometimes we short a person when we only see them through the lens of this person's race, this person's gender, this person's sexuality, this person's disability. And that's the only thing we recognize about them. And a lot of conversations I have with students is your only interaction with this other person is because of that one thing. You're missing all the other things that makes that person a person. And a lot of the hateful things that are said, we're encountering the word sped being co-opted as a negative slur. It's frustrating because it's a reference we use for a department that provides services. So now it's like, well, I don't want to use that word if kids are going to hear me say that when I'm referencing services for special education and think I'm saying something derogatory about kiddos. So it's like, oh gosh, do we change our languaging now so that that's not a confusion? But making sure that kids see the whole person, because when they see a whole person, they're much less likely to be hateful about that one aspect of a person. And adults, I guess I should throw a caveat that. And adults, make sure adults also see a whole person.
I think you hit the nail on the head, is that we need to see a whole person. Whether we use person first language or not, some people do come from cultures that are very collective oriented first. That's why some cultures have the family name come before their personal name and other aspects of like that. So there are some preferences we're always having to deal with, but it's important that we're dealing with the whole person and being cognizant of their identities and who they are, and trying to be respectful of how they want to identify themselves and how they want to be treated. Because at the end of the day, we all want to see the totality of a person. I said that a couple of times, that not tonight, but in the district when I'm having talks about how we see, we're like all people, we're like some people, and we're like nobody all at the same time. And we have to always honor that. And I know it is difficult sometimes, but if it becomes habit for us, as in this work that we do, it becomes easier and easier to create the community that we want to see in this world. Disabilities do provide some challenges, some very specific challenges for teaching and learning and how we create community in our schools. And we need to have these discussions and make sure that these things are part of the discussion when we talk about our DEI lens and how things are going to impact all students in our community. So I'm very thankful that we have folks here. Is there anyone else who has a comment or insight or feelings about this topic that they are burning to share? There we are, Varshini and Kelly, then Kelly.
One way for students to get past just looking at the disability and making assumptions is having more co-educational opportunities. Like for Unified PE, it could be advertised more. I mean, I didn't even know it was a thing in freshman year. And the work that happens there is absolutely amazing. Getting to work with people with disabilities, for me, has like opened up my mind so much. And I can say the same for my friends. So having more classes that are coeducational and having them be advertised more so more kids can work with other kids with disabilities, I think would be great.
Excellent. Thank you. Kelly.
I love what you just said, Varshini. Love it. So I think it's important that we all have multiple identities and we all identify. And often in education, we start to categorize as having a disability or not a disability. And that came about because of legislation and funding sources, rather than what are our best ways of working with children and creating supportive environments to be able to support them. And so it's a big shift in perception for everybody to recognize those multiple disabilities. And because someone may have a developmental disability, that doesn't mean that's their first identity. And so being able to celebrate all their abilities and lift those abilities is what I hope we as Guilderland go forward with. And I know that's the important work of this DEI committee, but that's, I think, what we're trying to do in our department as well.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Well, thank you everyone for having us here. I appreciate the conversation, and I want to just piggyback on what Kelly said and Varshini. Those unified opportunities where you bring together students with different abilities and the range are so powerful to be a part of. And I think it just goes to the true sense of belonging that neurodiverse students and our students with disabilities feel when they're with their peers. They feel welcome, they feel supported, they feel a part of something bigger. So how can we bring that to classrooms? The one video that Derek showed about the attitudes and biases as part of the limitations for our students who have more significant challenges. I mean, there's a range of disabilities, there's a range of strengths, there's a range of needs. And it's true, I think we need to, and I'm glad you're talking about this and will be part of our conversation, is how to create welcoming environments for all of our students and create classrooms that embrace neurodiversity, embrace different thinking. I think about my own son who needs to move. He needs to be moving to learn. He bounced on a therapy ball doing his homework. He worked upside down. It just needs to move. So I know others that need to move when they're thinking and learning and doing. And do our classrooms embrace movement? No, I mean, sit in your seat, sit at the table, you're up, you're about, they're here. And, so I think there is so much to dig into. And I'm glad we're having this conversation, but it's about that true sense of belonging that our unified opportunities and our co-integrated classroom settings foster. And how can we get our students with different abilities to shine and show their talents? And so thank you.
Definitely want to thank you for coming out and sharing. And I'm looking forward to seeing you actually in a couple months to really tie this home, to really get to get down to the nitty gritty of what this looks like in our schools and how we need, what's really in front of us. Oh, go ahead, Nina.
Yeah, I just have a question regarding kind of administration aspect of it, but based on the new trend, or I guess you'd say the new choice of the state to move into pathways, rather than maybe the Regents diploma might be changing. I wonder to what extent that's going to allow for more of that diversity in the classroom, if there's more of an understanding that each child has different goals that may not be the typical Regents diploma that we've been hitting home since the 90s in the same way. And maybe that Pathways program might allow for some more of that, those options to take hold in the classroom, hopefully.
Does anyone want to speak directly to what's happening at the state level? I have an idea what could be influencing that, but
Well, number one, Nina, I think the pathway conversation at the high school level has been one that's been toyed with for quite some time. It has traction certainly right now. Whether or not the Board of Regents decides to, act on it, we'll see. I think the individual pathway option would be beneficial for students. I always have been. That was my position a long time ago as a high school principal. So I think that. Obviously Mike has his pulse on that conversation. The high school administration has to see how that shakes out. But I think the individualization of those pathways to a credential is beneficial for a student. I don't know, Derek, if you want to weigh in. I mean, I know minimal of the conversation.
I'm coming at it from another perspective as well. And that is that when I got to the higher education level, doing academic support, what I found is that most of the students who had accommodations, who had 504s or IEPs, that's when people paid attention to how people processed information and how they learned. And I was like, why weren't we doing this across the board? Because every student needs to develop a personalized learning system if they're going to be able to survive in a college environment and reach their potential as learners. So in our academic support center, we were focusing on students developing a personalized learning system. Now that we dial this back, we know that people learn, deep learning happens most in social situations. We know that students learn through different epistemologies. So that knowing is good, and having knowledge and being able to regurgitate that knowledge and spit it back on a test is one form of knowing and showing your knowledge. But there's also making, and there's also playing. And one of the key things to learning is being able to deal with frustration. And play is one of the key ways that young people learn how to deal with frustration, yet we don't really incorporate that in a various way into our pedagogies in our classrooms at this stage of the game. But that's where education is moving. So pathways is one antidote to trying to say, how do we solve the fact that students learn differently, that they can demonstrate their learning in different ways, and how do we accommodate all of the different strengths that the students bring to the table in addressing societal problems. So the education is coming to a crossroads where it's going to change. I love that Gilliland is thinking along those lines already, and having these discussions that are happening with figuring out what the future is going to look like for our students and how we need to transform our classrooms. And we have people here and on this call who are looking at different ways that we can support students in a multi-tiered fashion to make sure that everyone is receiving the accommodations they need to be successful in the classroom. But these are conversations that we need to be having across the board, and have everyone having the eye of an equity lens, in my estimation, of looking at these problems and making sure that we're serving, that we're doing the best for all of our students. And that's part of why we're going down this road. And I'm hopeful that we'll be leaders instead of followers in this road that we're walking. And it bears importance that we need to know the people who are on this call, who are working on this stuff on a daily basis. And that is Lisa, Megan, and Kelly. And that's why we're going to invite you back to talk about this. And thank you for giving us some alumni to bring out to really help round out our discussion about this experience. And it's teaching us a lot about how we need to view student learning and our sense of community here, and make sure that equity really means what we say it's supposed to mean, that we're deliberately being inclusive of everyone that's in our community and trying to accommodate them. So thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you for those who participated and shared your thoughts and opinions. These are difficult topics. They're sensitive topics, but they're necessary conversations that we have to engage in. So I'm glad that people are engaging in them, that they're thinking about them and wondering about these. So if there's no other comments, I will definitely put it back in the hands of our our leadership tonight, who's administering our meeting.
Okay, if everyone has said what they wanted to say, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Okay, Ms. Jager, and then a second. Ms. Bedgood. Okay, then thanks for coming out tonight, and everyone have a good night.
Thanks, Varshini.
Great job, Varshini. Thank you for facilitating tonight. Have a good night, everyone.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Great job, Barshini.
Yeah, nice job, Ocean.
Take care. Thanks, Lisa, for coming out. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.